Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, a Mid-Trap podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
Man, it just got cold out the last week or so.
Yeah,
Winter's here. I don't know what happened to fall. It's come and gone.
We spring forward or fall back into winter.
Right. Yeah, the clock changes just earlier today. It's here. Well, how about you? What's going on? You've been awfully busy.
I hate daylight savings time, with a passion.
Hot take.
It's useless. It causes headaches. It causes traffic. It causes anxiety to my kids. It doesn't really affect me. The fallback, I was like, oh, I get an extra hour, whatever. And then the spring forward, it's like, oh, I lose an hour, whatever. It doesn't really affect my life that much. But now that I have kids and seeing how much it affects their routine and their schedule, and tonight, all of a sudden, Patrick, my oldest, hit a switch. And we're like, what is wrong? And then we look down the clock and we realize, well, instead of 8 o'clock, it's he thinks it's 9 o'clock. And it's just, I don't know. Hot take, I hate daylight savings time.
Now that makes a lot of sense, though. I wouldn't have approached it from that angle. But yeah, I hear you. Although my cat did start, he was just yipping at 7 o'clock. And I'm like, what the heck are you doing, Dumbo? He's just
because it's 8 o'clock. He
loud
thought it was
as
8
he could
o'clock.
be. It's 8 o'clock, and he wanted his wet food. Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah, I need to get rid of it. Let's actually do something in Congress. Get rid of daylight savings time, please.
Coming from a PhD biochemist, I think he knows what he's talking about.
We're not farmers anymore. We don't need we don't need it. I also think there's farmers out there that say you don't need daylight savings time. So
I should know, but that was the original impetus, the agrarian calendar or something.
Yeah, I think
Sunlight.
It had to do with the ability to maximize your day in sunlight, right?
Right. Did it have anything to do with the Industrial Revolution and the working
when I
9
think
to
about
5?
that, when I think about that, we're going way off topic here. But when I think about that, no matter what, the farmer is going to get up, and do stuff either in the light or not in the light. So do they even care?
Well, all right, we got to ask Scott Coleman. He's our resident farmer.
He is our resident farmer, so. But Arizona doesn't even do daylight savings time. They're just screw it.
Yeah, how does that work? So their time zone.
They locally changed
the whole state.
The whole state. Yeah, so depending on the time of the year, I think if you live in Riverside, California, you if you live on California, on a side touching Arizona, at any point you could be 1 to 2 hours difference from them, depending on that's crazy. I had a friend who she used to live in California and then she worked in Arizona.
Boy. Yikes.
And it was all messed up.
You change your clock every time you're driving.
Yes.
My goodness. Yeah, I don't know, man. But
anyways,
our guest today has absolutely nothing to do with daylight savings time. But pushing the clocks back an hour keeps us 1 hour further away from his publication date, which is this Thursday, November 11th, when our guest Eric Bishop's first book comes out, The Body Man. And a lot of you have seen his work on social media, and we are happy I'm happy since Chris, you couldn't make the interview, but I was happy to talk to him all about the book, all about the process he has gone through, years in the making, getting this book to print. So any aspiring authors out there, Eric has some great advice for you. Never quit. Make it happen. And I think you'll be inspired by what he has been through and the excitement coming this week with the publication of The Body Man. So enjoy this interview. Today, I am joined by a special guest and friend of the podcast, soon to be published author with the release of his debut novel, The Body Man. Welcome, Eric Bishop.
Thank you. Appreciate coming on, especially a podcast dedicated to my favorite, Vince Flynn. So
The master, the master.
The master, absolutely. He's on my Rushmore for sure.
All right. And I could tell in the Body Man, there are a lot of Flynnianisms, as we like to call them. I could definitely see the inspiration that Vince was to your work.
Yeah, he absolutely was. Him and Clancy. I got my love for thrillers. My dad used to actually work for the phone company, and he would get, so much downtime. They'd be in manholes or up on bucket trucks, and they'd just have hours. So they'd read. So he'd bring home these paperbacks, these worn paperbacks, and that was the first thing I started reading was Clancy, who is still the master for me.
Right.
But Flynn came along. I think I was in college. I found my first year. No, it was my first year of college. It was right when I was getting out of college is what it was, when he first came on the scene. And like with a lot of writers, I think he learned from his favorites and learned his own style. And so he, really perfected, I think, what Tom did with his writing style, which was, Tom, I've got his books up here. There, Tom gives you the dictionary. He gives you everything. And so what I think Vince did brilliantly was he gave you so much good quality stuff, but he was able to keep it concise.
Right.
And I think a lot of writers learn then from Vince, and that's how I started writing, probably because of Tom, but I think Vince helped me, or just reading his books helped me really perfect my own style and really just keep it more brief, and then you could go on and on for some stuff. And that works for some authors and works for some genres. But yeah, I think Vince really changed the political thrillers. And now everyone you're seeing since then has really been in some way emulating, I think, what Vince did, or at least a lot of people are.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, since we're getting there with your inspirations, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into writing. I know it's been a long journey. I've enjoyed seeing it documented on your social media, and you just are a power player in the social media game. So can you tell us, who is Eric Bishop? Not just the author, but the dad, the family man, the adventurer. How'd you come to be where you are?
Yeah. So, after school, I got a business degree, had a financial management degree. So I started working corporate America jobs. I started writing actually in college. I actually started with, of all things, poetry. I've actually looked back on some of the poetry I wrote in college and, like shudder, like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? But yeah, I read a lot of Shakespeare as a kid. I actually have his complete works down here in the bottom of the bookshelf. I can't see the bottom. And, that kind of just got the bug started with me of liking to express in the written form. And while some people thought writing was like a chore, I didn't, unless I'm being told what to write. Now that can easily, as a teacher yourself, when you're getting told to do something, sometimes you don't enjoy it as much. Right. But when you have that free will, you have that ability to do what you want, it's a big deal. So, but yeah, after college, actually, I wrote actually a book with a friend. I can't now that I'm drawing a blank what the name of it even was. But we actually wrote chapters, and I would write a chapter, then he would write the next chapter. We went back and forth, and more of a fun thing to do. And but it was pushing close to 100,000 words. I actually pulled the document up probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and again I shuddered at it. I was like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. But again, it was that creativity coming out, and I think at that time I wanted to write a book, and I never stuck with it. So I started quite a lot of, I have a file called my computer. I have a file called books. There's a lot of folders under there. There's a lot of books. 4 are completed. I've got 4. The Body Man was the first one I published, but I have 3 others I completed. I'll talk about that if you want in a few minutes. But I have another folder called old books. And so those are the things I started pretty much around college up until probably 10 years ago or so. And what I found with that is Eric wanted to be creative, but Eric didn't have the dedication or zeal to finish anything. So that's where I was. So I would write something, I would, write 20, 30, 40 pages of something, and I quit. I'd stop doing it. So come 2014, I had a really good idea for a new book series. And I actually dreamed out or planned out 7 books in a series. So fairly audacious, probably. I had an agent tell me that one time. How could you dare think you could come up with the storyline for 7 books? And I looked at this guy, and it's in New York City Thriller Fest, and I looked at him, and I won't repeat his name, and I was just like, I mean, if you're going to write her, how could you not have that that ability? I don't know. Glad he wasn't interested in my book, that's for sure. But no, it took a while, but I planned it out, and in 2014, I said, okay, I'm going to start a book, and I'm going to finish the book, and that was my goal. It wasn't, of course, I wanted to write the best book I could, but my primary goal was I have this whole folder of unfinished works. Why don't I finish something this time? So I did, and it took me only about 3.5 months to write that first draft. It's not published, so maybe that's right. It's not, because it wasn't that good. But I thought I was on cloud nine when I finished it. I finished it in Yosemite, so I finished it like the most amazing place you can finish a book. It was the best memory, one of my best memories of my life, besides my kids and some family stuff. But it was so cool. And then I thought, okay, here it comes. They're all, so I started pitching it. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know the market. And so that was 2014. So, Mike, I'm talking to you, and it's 2021 and the first book's coming out. So that's kind of the story for a lot of authors. There's very few, there's no overnight success. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist in the publishing world. There's people that hit it big on their first book, but even that, they didn't write that book in 3 months and then boom, they become this famous person. They caught some good breaks, maybe wrote a brilliant book, but the stars aligned for that person and they made it. But the average Joe out there that has that desire, that zeal to write a book, you're looking at 4 to 6 books probably before you maybe have a career on your hands that you can actually sustain it. So it was that first book was a good punch in the gut, but it was an amazing memory. And I learned a lot, learned how to write, learned what not to do. And I'm still learning that. Even with the Body Man, when the publisher sent it to editing and gave me the copies back and looking at all the things to change and all that, it's like, oh man, I thought I knew what I was doing. And, apparently I have a lot still to learn. So
yeah, I think all of that, just the process over these years, and then even seeing that first copy, is important for people to see that this is a process. Yeah. It's not a one-time thing. You can't get discouraged at the first, bump in the road. And like they say, what is it? Journey of 1,000 miles begins with that one step. And you saying, I'm going to finish this book, even if that wasn't your best book, even if that was not going to be your first book you publish, you got that one done. And that was your goal. You checked it off. And then that gave you the momentum to carry forward. Absolutely. And that's the kind of the best. It wasn't advice that I made up. The first person I heard say it was actually Brad Thor, was the advice of never quit. I'm pretty sure it was Brad that had said, and again, he might've heard it from someone else, but it's just the first one I attributed to was, he said, the only difference between a published author and an unpublished author is the published author never quit. Mm-hmm. And that's when I'm on social media has got its pros and its cons. I'm on it way too much probably, but I do try to convey as often as I can that positivity that people need. And it's from the heart. It's what I truly believe is, if you want to accomplish anything in life, you're going to have to bust your ass and you're going to have to do the hard work. You're not going to fall into money. You're not going to fall into fame, which I hope people don't want that. But, you're going to have to work hard, and you're probably going to fail. And hopefully you learn some lessons from that. But when it comes to, at least for writing, it crosses other things. But of course, especially for writing, I constantly try to tell people, I even put it in my acknowledgments that I was just reading through the other night. That was super exciting to read my acknowledgments in my own book. But that's the central theme of what I try to put in there is to people is, look, if you start something, don't quit. Even if you do it just for yourself. I tend to view writing as a very, not a selfish motive or anything, but I write what I like to read. I've had people suggest that over the years, even family or friends say, well, why don't you, you're not getting anywhere with these political thrillers. Why don't you write historical or write this, write that? It's like, it's not what I want to write. And so if I'm and some people can do that. Some people can write something outside their interests. For me, they're going to see I'm a big hypocrite real fast, because if I write something that I don't enjoy what I'm writing, it's not going to work. So write what you like, write for yourself. But I do really stick to it is, if you start something, finish it. You might be the only one that ever reads it. It might be an absolute piece of dog crap. You know what? You started it, finish it for yourself, just for the sense of accomplishment. Because I think if you do that,
even if it's a horrible book, maybe you'll quit. Maybe that's the last, but at least you accomplished it.
And you learned something. Even if you
And you
do end
learned
up
something.
quitting, you learned maybe that was not what gave you that passion
Absolutely.
or that drive.
But what you probably will happen with a lot of people is they'll realize, man, that was really hard. But man, that sense of accomplishment. Like I said, when I finished that first book at Yosemite, I got emotional. I get emotional with every book I finish. And they're a gift. I really believe they're a gift, because there's a lot of people that never get to that point of finishing a book. And it's not patting myself on the shoulder saying, I got it, I finished it. No, but that's a gift you give yourself when you finish something, whether it be writing a book or learning to play the guitar, or, or a sports, joining a sports team, whatever it is.
Starting a podcast.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many podcasts out there, but guess what? If you want to stand out, if you want to put the time in, if you want to put a quality product out there,
right,
you might stand out. And or you have that's the cool thing about now. It's kind of scary about now, and it's powerful right now, is everyone has a voice.
Right.
And that's what's different about humanity. I study history a lot. And for most of history, the average person had hardly any voice, maybe with their friends or family, those closest to them, but they didn't have any platform. Now, it doesn't matter what you're born into, what circumstances you have, you can get your word out there. You can get your voice heard by people. And it's not that hard to do. Now, it's hard to stand out, yes. But again, if you're willing to put the time into it, if you're willing to start a podcast and willing to grow a reader, a viewership or listeners, the ability's out there, and it doesn't cost very much to do it either.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing. So.
Well, I don't want you to stop writing thrillers, but you might have a shot at self-help books and, inspirational ones with this talk.
They'd probably be pretty short, though. Yes, I can definitely talk it, but I had someone tell me at one point they were going to try to sign me up for get some kind of motivational thing. And I'm like,
right.
Oh, then it would sound horrible. I don't want to stand in front of 10,000 people. I probably sound like an idiot. And then I'll have to actually create an outline. And then I'll actually have to have a cognizant thought process. I'm just let it.
Stick with the thrillers.
But I would like to write other stuff. I talked about writing a children's book with my daughter all this year, and we have not done it. So I need to probably get back to this. She had a really interesting idea, and I said, I know some people in the industry. We might be able to get some movement on that. But Brad Meltzer is one of my favorites, and I love, besides his writing, I love the fact that he's not just Brad Meltzer political thriller. He's Brad Meltzer children's book author.
Right.
And his children's books, I mean, I buy them when they come out. I just got the Oprah Winfrey one, read it to my daughter. My daughter had heard of Oprah Winfrey. She's 10, but she didn't know much about her. And, I got to tell her the story of how, again, you've got someone like that, there's not too many Oprahs born out there, but Oprah she was born in abject poverty.
Right.
No bathroom in her house. I think no running water, if I recall. And she has materially become successful, but also from a personal standpoint, she's touched so many people's lives. She has that school down in South Africa that she has. And, I think at some point, especially if you start getting older, you start thinking, what are you going to leave behind? The best thing to do is leave the best version of yourself out there. But, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? And I had a friend a couple of years ago tell me that. He said, just think about what you want written on your tombstone. And he was dead serious about it. And I did. I spent some time thinking about that. It was a good time of introspective because, life's flying by. I won't admit how old I'll be this coming weekend, but much older than I thought it should be at this point. It's going quick, but it's up to you how you enjoy the ride as well. And for me, I knew the writing was something I had in me that I had to get out of me. And I've had that question asked before, but why do you write? And it's just because I have to. It's really as easy as that. I have stories to tell. If there's people out there that want to read them, then I'm honored. That's bonus. But I have stories I have to tell, and they have to come out. Whether I sell 1 copy, 0 copies, I'm just writing stories for my best friends. And that was someone, I think it was an editor I used earlier on. He said before he started editing my book, one of the books, he said, if I tell you right now this book won't get published, will you write a second book?
Would you still do it?
I was just like, absolutely. I said, then I'll write a 3rd book and I'll write a 4th book. And I do believe one of them will get published. But even if you tell me no, none of them will be published, even if you're Nostradamus, I'll probably give you a hand gesture, a dirty hand gesture, but also I'll write another book because I'm supposed to do that. Are they supposed to be successful? I don't know. That's out of my control.
Right.
I do the best I can.
Hey, birthday, publication day. This is a big week coming up for you.
It is a big week. I got to choose the publication date, actually. So my
Okay.
publisher said they wanted a date in November. And I thought about my birthday for a second. I was like, that would be a cool birthday present.
You got Veterans Day.
So it's come out on Veterans Day. And I reached out to several big name authors that are veterans just to say, hey, if I came out with a book on that date, and I told them the reason why I was asking them, and I'll tell you in a second, if I come out with a book on that date, is that going to be okay? Because I'm not a veteran. I did not serve. I have a ton. One of my best friends served for 20 years. I have the flags that are behind me and stuff came from him. He actually got me flags in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Kosovo, Libya. All over the place. I have a pile of flags that he gifted me. But I didn't want to. I want to talk to some veterans to make sure I wasn't using Veterans Day as a way to sell books. I was really careful about that because it's not the reason I chose Veterans Day. I didn't choose it because it was Veterans Day. I chose it because my mom's mother, call her Nanny, my grandmother, that was her birthday. She passed away 2010. So she never got to see me publish a book. She never got to read the book. I've got a memorial for her, in the front under books dedicated to my mom. But it's also dedicated to my grandmother. So when he said he wanted a date in November, I said, can I pick it? And he said, yeah. I said, well, they're a publisher. I said, I don't want to go around Thanksgiving. I want to go earlier in the month. And they just said, well, pick a day. And I said, well, I wanted to honor my grandmother. So that's why the 11th, that was actually her birthday. So that's why it's Veterans Day happens to be her birthday. So, yeah. So it's about my grandmother. Like I said, there's even if you read the acknowledgments, there's something in there, but there was a part of the book I was researching that required a number and a name, kind of a combination. At least what I was looking into, all these things had this. And so I said, well, I need to name it something. I need to come up with it. And I used actually her address. I used the address she lived in back when she was alive. And I spent a lot of time with her there. And that's something that I just, as a way to honor her. If I wasn't saying on this podcast, no one would ever probably know it. But it is in the acknowledgments. I mentioned the acknowledgement that's for her. But yeah, that's the fun part of writing.
Right.
Actually, right before we got on, I was saying goodnight to my daughter. I was telling her I was coming on a podcast, and she asked me, she's like, "So am I in this book, Daddy?" Now she's asked me this 100 times. I was like, "Well, you're in the acknowledgments," and she goes, "I'm that's all. I'm not in a character." I was like, "No," and she's like, "Well, why am I not?" And I was like, "Well,
well, hold on.
Dedicated.
There is a female character that I have no doubt, if the way you're raising your daughter, she has a chance to be as strong and as confident and a trailblazer as this character. So maybe her spirit is in there, her future.
I hope so. Well, to me, some of the, you have to name characters, obviously. And I don't know how most authors do that. I never really asked, hey, how do you name characters? I have a lot of different ways I do it, but I always and this is, like I said, this is the fourth book, plus I've started a whole bunch of others. I like to put a couple of the characters in there that are real people. It's not always their personality or whatever, with the exception of this book, The Body Man. And I do mention this in the acknowledgments as well. There is an FBI agent named Wes Russell. So Wes is a real guy. He was an Iraq War veteran.
Wow, okay.
I need to sit down and do some audio recordings with him this fall as I'm working on the next book, because he has a few stories that he's already given me permission to use that I'm going to give to the Body Man for the second book, because they're stories that you just like, no, this isn't real.
It couldn't have happened. Right.
Couldn't have happened, but he's not full of it. It's a real story. So I had a scene where we were out camping. This a couple of years ago, we were out camping, and I was telling about the book I was writing at the time, and I was like, "Well, I'll put you in a book. I got to have characters." And he said, "Well, I know my last words. Well, I know what they're going to be." And so He goes, "Will you put them in the book?"
Oh,
And I
wow.
said, "Well, I said, then I'd have to kill you." But he goes, "I don't care about that." So for one of the characters, he's a real person, and if you read that part of the book, those are what he believes his last 2 words on Earth will be.
Oh,
And I said,
wow.
and it made it through. It made it through editing. The publisher didn't shoot it down. So, but stuff like that's fun. I mean, he's tickled pink the book's coming out. He's told a whole bunch of his friends and his dad and all this. So I'm in the book. Man, if I can do that simple little thing of include someone's name and it makes their day, or
Right.
not that it sells books, but that it just, I mean, myself, I'm a writer, but above and beyond, I was a fan before I wrote any books, and I still, I'm a nobody. I might turn into somebody here soon, but I'm a nobody. But I'm in a couple books, and so anytime my name's in a book,
That's pretty
first time
cool.
I opened one of Jack Carr's books and I was in acknowledgments. You know how many people I showed that to? Like, I'm in. Of course, half of them were like, "Who's Jack Carr?" I'm like, "What's wrong with you people?"
That's pretty cool.
But when I showed up in his acknowledgments, and I met him, this 2018, I believe, the first time I met him out in New York City at Thriller Fest. And then when the True Believer came out, I was flipping through the book and I was reading the acknowledgments, and there was my name in the same paragraph, I think, with Brad Taylor and Tony Tata. Yeah, that's what it was in that one. And I was just kind of looking at it going, am I seeing this correctly?
Step 1, get your name in the book. Step 2, get on the terminal list set with Amazon, get a cameo in the background. Now that would be, the next step forward. That's a little harder, I must say.
That was probably, I will say I texted him one day and he was on set. He said, "Chris Pratt's here." And I'm like, whoa, I need to send a message to Chris. What in the world? But
no, so you were virtually on set.
I was texting Jack while he was on set, and he was living. But again, that's someone. Just look at other authors, and first of all, not necessarily what they achieve, but how they get there. And he's someone that, if you just watch his social media interaction, his interviews and stuff, such a genuine and humble person, who at this point's achieved a pretty good level of success in the industry. And I think I think when the Amazon series comes out, he's gonna, he might be here. He's gonna blow through the stratosphere.
Oh, absolutely.
At that point. I might not get my text responded after that, no, but he couldn't happen to a nicer guy, and someone that put in their time. Not only have I met him, but I watch a lot of the interviews he'll do and stuff, and and he knew when he was young what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted to be a writer. He knew he wanted to be a SEAL, and again, what did he do? He stuck to a plan, created a plan,
never quit
very well, and he never quit. And I think he wrote his first 2 books were written on spec, so he did not have a contract when he wrote. I know Terminalist was definitely done, and I think True Believer was pretty well done before the book went to Emily Bessler. So he took that leap of faith and said, "Okay, I'm going to try to write a couple books because this is what I want to do." And I think your belief has a lot to do with it. Your belief comes out. So I'm sure there's people out there that can fake it, but I'd say the vast majority can't. So, and believing in yourself is a huge first step. And again, like we were talking before, if you believe in yourself, there's a good chance what you're doing is what you want to do. It's what you want to achieve. And having that self-confidence is going to help you get over the finish line, or at least get you closer to the finish line. Versus if you have doubts, and I know writers have doubts, writers have writer's block and all these things. But I think really if you put in the hard work and you believe in yourself, and ultimately the 2 words, you never quit, you're going to get over that finish line. Again, that finish line might not look like what you thought it was going to look like. It might not be what you wanted, but there's going to be a lot of lessons to learn when you achieve whatever your goal is, whatever your dream is. So,
absolutely. But let's dig into your book, The Body Man. I mean,
absolutely.
We talk so much about the writing process. I want to read for the people who haven't seen this little teaser, I guess you can call it, that's on the cover. Sure. And again, no spoilers here. So everybody who has not pre-ordered the book, you've got a few more days to do so. Make sure you get your copy on publication day, coming this Thursday, November 11th. But check out this teaser. And I want to ask you, who is the body man listening to this? Who protects the life of the president? The Secret Service. Who protects the secrets of the presidency? the body man, and he's vanished without a trace. Now, I've heard of the body man in real life. Usually I thought of this low-key position who is always by the president's side for the logistics and maybe the minute-to-minute needs of where are my glasses, can I get a glass of water? You shuffle my papers. But man, you take this in a whole nother direction, almost like what Chris Howdy did, totally spinning everything on its head when we find out who and what the body man is. So without saying too much, where did this idea come from of the body man?
So good question. So I was actually, it's been several years now. It was several years that I even finished the first draft. So I was actually, of all things, I had a family of 4. I was doing a cleaning job one night. I wanted a new book idea. I'd finished, I think, my second book at the time. I might have been working on the third. I can't remember. It's been a few years. But I was at this cleaning job and I said, well, I need a new story. And so it was about a 3-hour job or so. So I got in there that night, turned the alarm off on this office building. And it wasn't a voice. It wasn't anything like that. But I just had this thought pop through my head. There's always someone who knows where the bodies are buried. And then at first, I was taken back by it at first. I'm like, the heck, am I supposed to write a mafia book or something? I'm like, but I played with it in my head for a very quick period of time. And I said, well, who would know where the bodies are buried? And I said, well, the body man would know where the bodies are buried. And then immediately the next thought I had was I had saw something on the news about President Obama, and he had a guy that worked for him named Reggie Love, real guy. And the media called him the body man. I've been asked this a few times, and I honestly never dug into Reggie's what he did for Obama, and maybe what he really did isn't even out there. I do know a Secret Service agent that knew Reggie and interacted with him, so that was kind of fun to meet up with this agent after the fact and said, "Oh yeah, I knew Reggie," but I don't know what Reggie did. I think I had heard or saw something that he held his BlackBerry, and the president might have smoked, so he might have held his cigarettes for him. A few things like that, but he was there to help the president do whatever he needed. So that thought popped in my head, and immediately I rejected that and said, well, that's going to be a horrible book, because I need my BlackBerry to send a text. No, the last president, they just took his iPhone away from him basically, and disabled his account. So, but so I played with it in my head, and I said, well, I had 3 hours ahead of me. I said, well, what if there actually was a role that the Secret Service referred to as the body man, but what if their job wasn't to protect the president? What if their job was to protect the office? And what does that look like? And so for over a 3-hour time period, I really flushed out, it wasn't the exact story of what you read now, but I flushed out a good high level of what that would actually be. And where I came down with that is, well, if the body man has if the president does something they shouldn't do, the body man steps in, they become a cleaner. They clean it up. They make the problem go away. But the second part of this is if the body man has the ability to prevent the president, him or her, from doing something that's going to damage the reputation of the office, the body man has the authority to stop that from happening. In this book, it's presented, but it's not flushed out. Like it's not a major storyline. In the books that are coming, because you know how Washington is, they do not like the idea of someone being unelected and having power.
Right.
And you have someone that really, when I kind of chewed up what this role did, I'm like, this person has a tremendous amount of power. And they really do, in my creation, and maybe this is a real person, we're not going there, but they really do have no authority over them. So they can kind of carte blanche, do whatever they want. Well, that could be a real dangerous situation. And in the second book, especially, the role kind of becomes a little more visible, and people don't like this. They don't like someone out there that, has in essence more power than the president of the United States. So that needs to be stopped. Can it be stopped? Do we want it stopped? I don't know, but we'll find out.
One, I'm intrigued to hear that there is future, for the body man, because the way you leave us with a cliffhanger, I'm not going to say much more. There's definitely another story there. You can absolutely tell you left us wanting the next sequel of the story. But I think even if someone could look at what you've created with this position of the body man, this unelected person kind of operating in the shadows, I think, and this is something Vince would often do, he would have a character or a position that represented a lot more than just the individual. The person represented a part or a slice of a society oftentimes, in the political sphere that he wanted to, beat down, or in the intelligence world where that person represented, the competence or the people that we actually need in power doing the right thing. And so the characters stand for a lot more. I feel like the body men, as you described, could stand for so many things in the real world. These shadow operators that do have power, that do have authority, that no one elected, no one knows about. And now you've simply taken that, put it in the White House, and gave it to somebody who we trust with that responsibility, which opens up a whole door of storytelling. What happens if it's not somebody we can trust down the road? And there's a million avenues to take that.
Right. Well, and it's probably a subconscious thing I'm doing when I'm writing these. I'm always trying to, look at the world and look at what's going on in the world. And so definitely when I was writing this, there was a lot of political upheaval going on. The division between people. I mean, it's at an almost asinine level right now. And I don't know that it can come back. That's what scares me. But what I try to do with the stories, and not smack you in the face with it, but I'm trying to ask bigger questions. I'm definitely asking it with the body man role of, okay, are you guys okay with someone in there that's elected? And, and there's probably going to be people that would say, no, I would not want that. And there's other people who will be like, well, these jokers are elected and they're horrible. Right. So sure, let's bring in someone that's, that's not one of them,
right?
That's not interested in power. And I think it opens up a lot of ethical questions. It opens up, but I do want people, I don't know, to me, and again, I write in a way for myself. I like a book that makes me ask questions and makes me think outside the what you're used to, outside the bounds. Speaking of like Chris and Deep State, I mean, he did some stuff in that book that you just you haven't seen before, or at least I hadn't seen before. And that's what intrigued me about his storytelling. Because I think it's very easy. I think the publishing world is very, they like safety. They like to make money, of course, and I'm capitalist. I can totally understand that. But I think sometimes that ends up leading to formulas. The guy has to meet the girl, there has to be some kind of drama, and then they have to reconnect at the end. Change it up. Sometimes that works. But I don't, and that's one thing that I will say that I zero, and I don't make promises after one book because that would be very stupid. But I'm going to try to keep things fresh. I want to keep things relevant, but I also do want people to ask some questions when they're reading the book.
Yeah.
And again, not be preachy with it for sure. And I think unknowing to me, probably again, because I have Vince on my Rushmore, I think I learned to do a lot of that from just reading Vince's book. Transfer of Power was the first one I had read, and that was, it's right here. It's and actually it's the only Vince Flynn book that I have that's signed.
Nice. That's a good one.
That was, and it's his old. It's not his common signature. He actually does have his middle initial in there,
and it's the taller one. Yeah, he's got the taller V and the taller initial early on. You can tell Transfer of Power days, and then it became this very almost squat, where all the characters are almost the same height later on. So you could tell, what stage of his career he signed that in.
Yeah. So that's my most. I have a lot of books that I treasure. That's my most treasured one. I'm in other books. I have signed books from my favorite authors, and I love those books. But if someone says if the house is burning down, you can grab one book. Well, besides your kids' pictures or anything like that, you can grab one of your books on the shelf that's sitting here. That's the one I'm grabbing all day long. So that's the one. Yeah, that was a cool one to get. I'll tell you the story another day how I got that one. It's not it probably surprised people. He's the way he did things definitely influenced me. When he died, people were just like grieving. People that never knew him, never had interacted with him. I think, who was it? Oh, Jack Carr. And not to bring up Jack again, but Jack actually, one of the podcasts he did, I was watching, he actually got to meet Vince, I think, at SHOT Show and got to spend like an hour with him or something. Yeah. And I think he even joked and said he didn't even get a selfie with him because it was back before selfie days or all that. Or maybe he did get a picture but didn't have it or whatever it was. There was no photographic proof of it after the fact. But, just to have that interaction and learn from him. And he's one of those ones that, man, if I could have met an author and picked his brain, I would have loved to. Because again, I think I can't speak for him, but I think he learned from Tom, and Tom learned from someone else. It's always, that's the cool thing about writing. And it's such an open community where people try to help each other.
Right.
I'm constantly, not constantly, but every couple months, someone will reach out to me and say, "Hey, will you read my book?" And someone that has not got published, trying to get published. And I do it, and I don't get a million requests like someone like a Jack Carr or a Vince probably would have gotten. But I'm able to do it. But I'm also wanting to do it because I want to try to help someone, just like I got helped. Because there was some really big name authors from the get-go that said, "Hey, if you need something, let me know." And I was kind of like, it was only a tweet or only a direct message on Twitter, but I'm like, really?
Cool.
They're going to help me? And they were sincere about it. I sent the book out the last couple of weeks. I sent some copies out to my favorite authors, which was really exciting and really intimidating because it's like,
right.
I hope they like it, and if I hope they don't like it, man, I hope they lie really good. And I don't know that they're pulling, that they really hated this book. So
that's good. The people, everyone is so open, right? Everyone. Yeah. Starting this podcast, we very early on said it would be a dream. We obviously couldn't have Vince, but it would be a dream to get to talk to Kyle Mills. Yeah. Neither Chris nor I are writers. We were never aspiring writers. We never even considered something like a Thriller Fest. And we wanted to market the whole thing as who we were, be real, two fans, two nobodies, but we love these books and we couldn't stop talking about them when we'd hang out. And so we said, hey, let's start this up. Well, immediately David Brown was like, hey, I want to know more about what you guys are doing. We're like, whoa, the publicist who knew Vince Flynn and like traveled with Vince Flynn and like was buddies with him. And then He's like, when do you want to talk to Kyle? We're like, what? Like everyone was just so open. And then all of the authors we've had on since, just what a great group of people in the thriller community. There's nothing like it.
No, there is nothing like it. And I think there's several reasons for that. I think most writers, and again, there's no all. It's never everything, never all. There's always the outliers. But most people that get into this are passionate about what they do. Most of them, it's not a first career. There's very few people that this is their first job as they write books and they're actually successful. So most people have matured. Right. They've kind of learned how life is. They kind of learn how you treat people. I think that's, and not knocking Hollywood, but if you're, I won't name names, but if you're one of these people and you're 16, 17 years old and someone gives you millions of dollars and gives you anything you want, it's kind of like what happened with, rock and roll stars, probably still does, but definitely back in the 80s and 90s, whatever they wanted, they had. Right. Oh, you're down? We'll get you on drugs. You want girls? You get girls. You get anything you want. So I had that conversation. I took my son to a Rolling Stones concert, the end of September, which was an amazing experience. It was such a cool experience. I'd never seen the Stones, but it also opened up a conversation for us. And we talked about some of the people that had died young and what happened to them. And, what I told my son is, you've got someone that's standing up there in front of 50 or 60,000 people rocking out, and they come off a stage and 2 days later, they're back at their house.
They're alone.
There's no one screaming. They're all alone. They don't get the adoration. And they want to fix, they want to pick me up. So what do they turn to? Often they would turn to drugs. And sometimes it would kill them. And it definitely would, a lot of times they become addicts. And, they did not end up having a great life. So they had this amazing skill and this ability to draw people in, and they were miserable. And from my interaction, you don't see that with writers. And again, I think it's not to compare them with rock stars. Some of these writers are rock stars, especially in my mind. But they're older. Most of them have families, and this is, they're following their passion, but they also know how to put things, in perspective. And for that one, I always do go back to, and not trying to name drop here, but I always go back to Brad Meltzer for that. And he's one that has been kind enough to interact with me since early on in social media. He's been super supportive. I met him a couple of years ago at an event he did in Atlanta, but I look at how he treats people, and I even ask people stories. Hey, have you ever interacted with Brad Meltzer? And every single person that's interacted with Brad Meltzer has the same story. He's the greatest guy. He's the best.
Nice.
And no one's like, he seemed okay. No, everyone, there's stories of him helping people move books and do this and that. And, it just, you meet these genuine people that really care about others. And I think too, they know what it was like to get started especially for writing. They knew what it was like to try to get an agent or to get your first publishing deal. And it's brutal.
The grind. Yeah.
There's no rhyme or reason to it always, because I get advanced books on occasion, not as many as I used to, but I get some sometimes from authors, and they're really, really good books, and they can't get an agent to give them the time of day. And it's just like, man, this person, and I'll read some other books that are published that I heard are great, and I'll read it and I'll be like, I won't get past the first chapter. And
right.
That's the other thing I've started to do, just because time is getting like precious. Man, if I'm not drawn in the first chapter or two, I used to finish it, because I've started this book. I'm obligated to finish it. No, if you can't hook me in that first chapter or two, I don't care who you are. There's a good chance and that I'll put your book down, because there's another one out there. So which puts a lot of pressure then on writers and they say that all the time with agents and stuff, that first paragraph, that first line. I won a first line contest several years ago at Thriller Fest. Steve Barry actually said it was the best line.
Wow. Love Steve Barry.
Several people got it. Oh yeah, he's a great writer.
Yes.
So I had to take that line, and the thing I wrote with that was not something that was actually turning into a novel. So I was like, how do I take this first line and put it into one of my novels? And I found a way. So at some point when that book comes out, I can say, well, that one did win Best First Line by Steve Barry. So
that's pretty cool to hear. It reminds me that Chris and I were hoping maybe towards the end of covering Vince's series, we want to do a recap of Vince's best opening lines and rank the books according, pick our top 5 best opening lines of a Vince Flynn book. So maybe thrillers in general. We'll do that for all thrillers.
That would be really cool. That'd be cool to compare. I never thought about doing that, but even just to compare different authors, how they start their books. Like
that's
those first,
point.
How does Jack Carr's first lines compare to how Vince does it, or how Tom did it, or how Mark Graney does it, or whatever. But yeah, but there's just some really, really good writers out there. That always gives me hope too for the future. Because the other thing I'll just say real quick is I think people have the impression that, well, writers don't want to help each other because they're competition. And it's like, yeah, I spent a year writing, not really, I write them quicker than most people, or quicker than some, but a year total, marketing it, all the other stuff. I spent a year on a book. Someone's going to read it in 4 to 8 hours, depending on their reading speed. They're not just going to read my book. There's a good chance that if someone reads them that fast, they're probably reading 100 books a year.
It's the rising tide.
Yeah, the rising tide
lifts all boats.
Yep, absolutely, exactly. Totally true. So, so there is no competition that I've seen. I haven't, and I've been around a bunch of these authors at conferences and just watching events and stuff. And there's camaraderie is what there is.
And you see that
really a blessing.
You see that on social media when someone posts, "Hey, I just finished all the Brad Thor books. Anybody have a suggestion?" And they want the next name. They want the other folks. Right. And people are clamoring for the genre. It just shows the strength, I would say, of the genre as a whole as well, that it's not going anywhere. Like thriller genre it's got an audience.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of very creative, and again, it can be it's possible to fall into a formula, but man, the guys and ladies that are out there writing, the creativity just comes out. And there's so many really good books out there. And, even just bring it back to Vince, we were talking earlier how, people mourn for him, and, everyone thought, myself included, everyone did, that the series is done. And then of course, okay, the new guys coming in, Kyle Mills. Okay. They're going to try to keep this thing alive. Man, did he nail it though.
Right.
Man, did he nail it. And I've got all his books, his Vince books. And he really is a master to be able to pick up where someone left off and keep it going. But what I think, I interact with Kyle some. Kyle's a great guy. I really appreciate any time I message him and he responds back and all that. But what's so amazing is he took a character that a lot of people love, and he just didn't flatline that character, not kill it, but flatline in the sense of, well, keep going what right. Vince did.
Ho-hum.
He's actually turning this into what Kyle thinks it should do.
Yep.
And he's growing the character and he's growing the storylines, and which kudos. I mean, yeah, you're gonna just I hope he writes them for as long as they'll let him, because he just does such a great job doing so. But
Right.
I would not want that job. I would not Don Bentley just got the Clancy books.
Right.
And Mark Cameron does the Clancy books. I don't believe Eric Bishop would ever be contacted, so I don't have to worry about that. But I tell you what, that would be intimidation.
Yeah.
I don't know. That takes some courage to carry on a legacy that's been, because even like I said, when Tom died or when Vince died, the books didn't just falter at that point, or they weren't rehash of their same stories. These guys that have stepped in to fill these roles have excelled, which is cool, very cool.
And the balance. Look, we covered recently The Survivor by Kyle. And the due diligence that he put in to respect Vince, and he took little hints from The Last Man and planted those seeds that Vince gave, and just they blossomed. And he earned, the right to advance the character by showing I can be true to Vince's vision. And now, however many, 7 or 8 books in, with more on the way, he can grow it and make it his own. And so I think that's a model, as you're talking about Don and others picking up series. Yeah. They have a model in what Kyle did to respect the craft, absolutely, but also put your stamp on it.
What did Kyle have? 3 pages that Vince had started?
Right. Exactly.
And that's like kind of, where was he going to go with this? There's no notes. I remember one of the Kyle's interviews on it. He didn't have very much to go with. And,
exactly.
Kudos, hats off to Kyle. And again, he's nailing it. He's nailing it. And he's showing how good people can put out some pretty amazing products, is what he's showing.
Right. Hey, so since we're talking about Mitch Rapp here, we got to ask you, like we do most of our guests, do you have a favorite Mitch Rapp novel, a favorite character from the series? Tell us about how you met Vince and how you got into Mitch Rapp.
Yeah. So again, I attribute a lot of that to my dad. So my dad worked for the phone company growing up, and my dad would he'd constantly bring back these tattered paperbacks. And so he'd hand them to me, and I started with Clancy. And a whole bunch of other authors that he brought, but Clancy was the one that always stood out. That was always, when Dad brought you back, the newest, when Rainbow Six got in your hands, or The Bear and the Dragon got in your hands, you were somebody at that point. And those books, I mean, they're all here. They're huge.
They're big.
Bear and the Dragon. Bear and the Dragon is it over 1,000? Yes, it is over 1,000
definitely.
pages. And this isn't small or big print either. These are massive prints. But so from there, that kind of got me started with political thrillers. And then I don't recall now, it's been too many years and I'm getting too much gray hair, if Dad told me about Vince Flynn, or by that point I read so much on my own that I don't recall how I found out about Vince. But as soon as I believe that I read Transfer of Power before I read Term Limits. Of course, Term Limits came out first, and Vince pretty much self-published that. I think he was hawking that out of the trunk of his car.
Right.
Which again, to me, is always something I try to tell people, look, because I didn't sign with a major, huge publisher. I didn't end up with a big thing. And that's okay. I got my foot in the door. And, you have to be careful, because if you think you're going to be the next Vince Flynn, you're probably going to be the next disappointed person is what you're going to be. You're not going to be the next Vince Flynn.
Right.
But what you need to take out of that is, if Vince can make it, you can make it.
Yes.
Well, again, how was Vince going to make it? Vince didn't quit. He was selling, he was working insurance sales or something like that, I believe. So, just selling books, schlepping however he could to get his foot in the door. And why? Because he loved what he did. He believed in what he was doing. It wasn't a marketing thing. You can't write those kind of things. Well, you could, I guess, but as a general rule, you write stuff like that because you're passionate about that. So
exactly.
So probably, to answer your question long form, Transfer of Power is probably my favorite, not just because I have it signed, but probably also because it's signed. But that kind of got me started in reading Vince. For characters, it's hard. Always the standard is, Mitch Rapp's always my favorite. But what I think Vince did such a great job of is he brought in this cast of characters around Mitch
Right.
that carry Mitch most of the time. You know, because I mean, there's times in the series that, you know, Mitch isn't always the guy you necessarily want to root for. You know, he's not always making the decisions that I would want to make or that I want to see my heroes make.
Yep.
But the cast of characters, so that's a hard one. Yes, I don't know how you don't go with Stan Hurley. Probably, I mean, Stan's
Stan Man.
probably one. Stan's on the list probably. Apart from Mitch, probably Stan's the one that I really. I knew a lot of people probably like him too.
Yep.
That
Fan favorite.
yeah. So one of the friends that I killed in the Body Man, he reminds me of Stan. So that's probably why I killed him. So, but hey, he wanted to die. That's all I can say. But yeah, and that's what I try to do with my characters too. Try to make it more of an ensemble. One of the earlier things I had heard from someone that I knew I was onto something with this book is they said, you took a character that is one of the quote unquote bad guys and you made him sympathetic. You made us want to root for him, especially towards the end with what occurs. And then when I got that feedback, I was humbled by it, but it was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's where my writing, that's that next step where if you can take a character that you shouldn't root for and give people maybe a reason to root for it, you kind of cross a threshold. And I think that just shows that you're getting better at storytelling. Because it's very easy to just create one-dimensional characters.
Right.
And so you try to, as best you can as a writer, and it's a learning process is what it is. Nobody does it out of the gate, is you try to make people with a lot of depth and some, people that, give the person a reason to turn the next page, honestly.
And I think you also accomplish that. And again, don't want to say too much about spoilers, but with a certain FBI duo that plays a main role, you definitely see that depth of character and relationship building there. So kudos.
That was a fun one to write, I will say, without giving any spoilers away. And that one was probably, I will say, I don't give a spoiler away. That one was really probably in my mind created because of all the cop action buddy movies I saw when I used to watch a lot of movies, which I gave up to write. Basically, I still do watch some, but half the time people say, "Oh, did you see this movie?" And I'm like, "No, I did not."
Yeah, life of a writer.
Was it pre-2010? Because if not, maybe I might have saw it. Although my kids would just tell you I slept through them all now because half the time, like, I slept. Oh, so quick funny story. So I slept through Deadpool 2. Now I was with some special forces guys out at Campbell and late night going to a movie theater, and the movie theater was on prom night of all nights, and apparently the air conditioning didn't work. We got to the back theater and it's like 80 degrees.
Yikes.
I'm already old anyways, so I sit back and I fell asleep, and I wake up and I look over, and my buddy who's part of fifth group, he's just still staring away. He's like 20 years, not 20 years, but he's much younger than me. And he never said a word about me sleeping. So I come home and I tell my friend, yeah, I fell asleep during Deadpool. He's like, how much did you sleep through? I have no idea. Let's go see it. Yeah, I slept through about 45 minutes of that movie because I stayed awake for the second time the whole time. And when I fell asleep, I was like, okay, this is where I don't remember anything after. And I just kept watching for 45 minutes. I'm like, there we are again. And I was like, look down at my watch and I'm like, oh, that's pathetic. I just paid twice to see this movie.
And you didn't wake up covered in popcorn sitting with special forces guys. I thought they'd be, ribbing on you.
They must have been so enthralled that they didn't even see that I was sleeping. Apparently I wasn't snoring.
They were into the movie. Okay.
I think I would have got hit.
That makes sense. Oh, well, you hinted at it before. So as we wrap up here, what's next for the Body Man? Because something tells me, and I was happy to hear you say it before, there's more juice in the tank for Eric Bishop, but also for this story of Nick Jordan and crew. So what can we expect next? Where are you headed with this?
So tentatively, the next book is, I always come up with a title before I start writing a book. Of course, publishers normally have that final say so. They can change your title on you. So as of now, and what I'm crafting is called Breach of Trust. And it actually starts off pretty close to when The Body Man ends. it's a much bigger story. It's much more of a global story. And it's as the name kind of says, is there's a breach of trust going on. There's actually multiple characters that it's tied in through. But like I hinted to earlier, without giving much away, is that people that don't like the fact that there's someone called the Body Man that's that close to the president, that has that much authority or power. And so, yeah, that's going to be challenged.
Okay, I'm ready for it.
Yeah, no, it's I said third book. I've done something I don't normally do because I'm not even done with the second book. Is I did actually start mapping out some of the third book, and I wrote the first chapter. Never done that before. I'm kind of doing some stuff I haven't done in the last year or so, but I do have the first chapter of the third book written. Doesn't mean that that's what it was. So I will say real quick, the Body Man started years ago, and I actually wrote the first chapter in Central Park. And it ended up getting changed. So what I wrote versus the finished product, the concept was there for sure. A lot of the things going on, but it got shifted around. So so just because I've written the first chapter of book 3 doesn't mean anything today or for tomorrow. So
it's not set in stone.
Yeah, no, but the third one though is the second one's going to be really epic, and the third one though, again, I'm trying to add another layer to the onion. The third one, there's going to be a lot more pieces coming into play that I have no idea how I'm going to pull them off. And that one to me is the fun part. That was always the thing that I've heard from people. They're like, well, first of all, how do you write the book? And it changes for every author. So I don't like answering that question very much, but because I'm a pantser, which Kyle Mills is the largest plotter that God ever created.
The opposite, yeah.
His outline is
right
half of my book,
right?
Basically. So he knows, he wakes up in the morning and I'm writing chapter 53, and wakes up the next day and says I'm writing chapter 24. I'm like, so I didn't make fun of him to his face because he's Mitch's dad, so he could probably take me out as well. But I was kind of like, how can you do that? Well, guess what I'm doing with the second book? I've written like 6 chapters that are the next chapters. So I've kind of started bouncing around a little. It's been, with all the marketing, with everything you got to do with the book, I'm not writing in the same pattern that I normally would write in the past. And so a lot of times now I'm coming up with an idea going, this would be a great chapter. And I'm like, well, that has nothing to do with what I'm writing now. And I'm like, it's in here.
Give it a shot.
All this gray hair tells me it might fall out at some point, so I just write it.
Put it on paper. Exactly. Try something new.
Absolutely. So
right. Hey, well, we want to leave you with another Mitch Rap Pod tradition. We often have guests and books that we like get their own limerick. So we have a double limerick for you, a Mitch Rap Pod special to leave you with.
Very cool.
Who protects the secrets of the presidency? No doubt, the Body Man is he. But poof, he is gone. 2 agents say, bring it on. More books from Eric Bishop? We'll see. Can't believe it's just a debut. Definitely put this book in your queue. So many twists, not to be missed. The Body Man delivers all the way through. Thanks for joining us tonight. It was really great talking with you, and best of luck on publication day.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I like that. So who writes those? You or Chris?
That's me. That's you. Chris is the brains of the operation.
He's the brain.
He's a scientist. He's a biochemist. So he's got the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty down on things. And I just write poetry.
That's hilarious.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed that interview that Mike had with Eric. Actually, he was able to stay on and talk extensively with Mike, some spoilers that we didn't decided not to run with this episode, but instead, in a couple weeks, give you guys a chance to go out there, buy it, read it. November 11th, it comes out. And then we'll run that spoiler-filled discussion that Eric had with Mike. And it gives me a chance to pick up, and I'll share my thoughts with Mike on the pod too. So,
yeah, maybe we'll run that in a couple of weeks. I know we're doing Order to Kill. I'm pumped about covering another Kyle Mills Mitch Rap book. So we'll do Order to Kill the next couple of weeks. Sorry, guys. It, again, was delayed. I know we're a little out of order in what we promised you, but I'm halfway through Order to Kill, so I'll be ready to chat about part 1 next week of that. Freaking fantastic. Dude, I have a hot take on that. Not going to share it now. You guys, you'll have to come back next week, but Chris, I'm really curious. I'm not going to tell you, but I have a hot take on Order to Kill.
Oh, you can't leave me in suspense like that.
I'm going to leave you and the listeners waiting for next week for my hot take, but it's a big one. It's a big one.
All right.
Yeah, and then so a couple of weeks out, maybe around Thanksgiving time, we'll drop that extra 30 minutes. I got to talk to Eric a little bit, and we have some spoilers where I ask him about the characters, some of his creations, and the plot. And so we'll have a spoiler-filled discussion coming at you. So get your book, get your copy, read through it, and expect that later on in the month.
All right. Well, we have to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, George, Matt, Don, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us at mitrappod.com or on Twitter and Insta at mitrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.